welcome to another fun-filled, packed episode of Gar Borras' Time Machine. This is episode 33, Gar. Can you believe we've come that far? And I want to let everybody know, today we're going to be looking back on Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, a great classic film starring, of course, Steve Martin, the late, great John Candy. And when Gar and I came up with the idea to do some episodes dedicated to the holidays, this was, Gar mentioned to me, hey, this is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, especially in reference to Thanksgiving, is like become a tradition with him and his family. So we're going to let you start today's episode off talking a little bit about that, Gar.
Well, when the movie came out, I never really thought of it as a Thanksgiving movie, and just over the years, it just kind of evolved into a Thanksgiving movie for me because, it's such a funny movie that you wind up watching it many times, and then after a while you start realizing, this really is a movie that embraces what Thanksgiving is all about. Yeah. And that's when I made that realization many years after the movie was made. I made that realization, and it stayed a tradition for every year after that.
Yeah, and I think part of that is the fact that kind of the main plot of the movie is that Steve Martin's character, Neil Page, is this like kind of traveling salesman. He's always going on the road, and he happens to be away somewhere, and his flight gets delayed, and it has become the tradition, all these great classic buddy movies, all kinds of mischief and things take place. It really drives them crazy. And again, the main plot of the movie is the two guys kind of finding a way to try to get Neil home in time to have Thanksgiving dinner with his family. So while it's not a main Thanksgiving theme, that's kind of a plot, and that's probably why the thought of Thanksgiving comes to you when you think of this film.
Well, it's really the ending of the movie that really made me realize that, because it all kind of culminates. Even though, the movie is priceless throughout, you finally kind of realize what the movie is all about when they have that scene at the end where Steve Martin's character Neil realizes there's more to Dell than he was realizing throughout his experience, with Dell. Yeah. He was the entire time he was so engulfed in wanting to get home to his family. Yeah. He wasn't really paying any attention to what was behind Dell. Yeah. What Dell's life experience was and what was going on in his life. He was just so not thinking or even interested in all of that. But finally, by the time the movie's ending and he makes that realization, that was really profound for me. I mean, that scene really affected me, and I think anyone that has a good heart would be affected by that, in a really good way, kind of realizing, because I think we go through life, being so busy with our life, and so concerned with, what we're trying to, achieve and all of these, we're so busy with all of that, we really don't pay attention to other people that are around us in our life. Yeah. And what their life experience is, which is like so different from our own. And that scene really made me realize that.
And I think we'll get a little more into the end of the film towards today's episode, but the one thing I will say now in regards to the end of the film is this. I at least thought after watching the film, and maybe Neil, Steve Martin's character was feeling this, that as crazy as Del drove him all through the film, that I think Neil kind of came to the conclusion that maybe he had become a better person just from knowing Del.
Well, yes, I think it was also the way that John Hughes made the movie. It was so subtle in how Steve Martin's character Neil was making these realizations.
Now, John Hughes is a big part of this film because he's a famous director that passed away a couple years back, and the thing is that at the time this movie was released, he was known more for making like kind of teenage films like Pretty in Pink and stuff like that. So this is kind of the first time he'd ever made a movie like this. And after this movie came out, he started to get a little more attention. People started really kind of paying more attention. And then after this, he of course did another holiday themed movie with Home Alone.
Well, it's kind of similar to Stephen King, because when Stephen King started his career, he was a horror writer.
Yeah.
But then later on, he started branching out and doing other works that were not horror.
Yeah.
Like Stand By Me and things like that. And that's when people were making a realization that Stephen King was much, much more than just being pigeonholed as a horror writer. And that's the same thing with John Hughes, because he was so good at making those teen angst movies, and they were so successful. The public just had this
demand,
this mindset, that's what he was all about in his filmmaking. And then when he did, Home Alone and Trains, Planes and Uncle Buck and stuff like that, people started realizing that there was way more to John Hughes than people were really realizing.
And when you talk about John Hughes too, what's interesting is he's one of these directors. Besides just directing the film, he wrote most of the scripts for his movies, and I would say that John Hughes has left a great legacy behind. And I say that because all those movies you just talked about, Gar, besides the fact that John Hughes wrote and directed those films, what do they all have in common now? I mean, and this shows you, years after he's passed, the fact that all those movies you just spoke of, they're all considered classic films.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because the type of movies that he was making, because they were more,
well, they were all.
I don't know how you would say it, frivolous, just entertainment, that kind of a thing, that he wasn't taken seriously. But now, after he's passed, and you get to look at it as a body of work.
I mean,
it's really impressive.
I mean, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, okay, one thing all John Hughes films have in common too. He was great, at creating, writing these great comedic moments in all his films. They were all great comedies. I mean, you even look at something like Home Alone. I remember the first time I seen Home Alone, I was thinking, yeah, right. How the hell is somebody going to go on vacation and forget one of their kids at home? Yeah, right. But it doesn't even really matter. It's just such an entertaining, fun-filled family film. It doesn't really matter. It just laughs all the way, and it's enduring throughout the entire film.
Well, a lot of people, see, when we decide to do these episodes of the Time Machine, when we decide because we have such a connection to what we're going to do this about, and that's kind of why I suggested this one, is because I have a real a deep connection to the movie. It's part of my traditions every year. but whenever we do the actual interview, of just like you, I do research.
Yeah,
Even though I know the movie well, I still do research on the movie. And I found out something while doing the research for this that I really didn't know.
Let's hear.
Was that John Hughes came up with the idea from his own hellish experience of trying to get home from Chicago.
Wow.
And it was very similar. It took many days
to get home.
For him, where it was only supposed to take like a certain amount of hours for him to get home.
Yeah.
But it was like to the T, what happened to him in that hellish experience, even though he didn't buddy up with somebody, it was his inspiration,
for the film.
And he actually wrote the first 60 pages of the script while he was going through that experience.
Well, that's a writer. That's a true writer at heart. You're actually living in the moment, and you're like, wow, this would make for a great film. While I'm sitting here waiting to get home, I'm gonna be writing and jotting some ideas down. That's a great director and a writer, like living in the moment. And you're so right. Like just to give people again an idea of when we're talking, the film was released November 25th, 1987. And that's kind of important. I think that's another reason you have the Thanksgiving connection to this film, because it came out Thanksgiving weekend that year, and that's that time of the year when the holidays are just kind of kicking off. And we've been doing a series of these holiday themed shows, Gar, the last few episodes, and I don't know about you, but I just love the holiday season. And let me ask you, I imagine like you must have watched this movie with like your wife and your daughter. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, not with my ex anymore.
Oh, okay.
My daughter has grown up, and
okay.
But
through the years,
whenever we're together, we always talk about the fondness of when my kids were growing up, of these traditions that we had, where we have like Christmas traditions of things that we like to watch, Thanksgiving, Halloween, and all that kind of stuff, and it's a family. I think that whenever people are making these movies, I don't think that they're really thinking about. They're making the movie, but while they're making the movie, they're always questioning whether the movie's going to be successful or not.
Oh yeah,
or if it's successful, how successful. You know what I mean? They don't even know if it's even going to be successful. So the last thing they're thinking about when they're making the movie is the impact that the movie is going to have on millions and millions of people that wind up watching the movie and really embracing it. I don't think that that's part of the thought process because nobody has a crystal ball and knows how the future is going to be.
Well, like going back to 1980,
in hindsight, when you watch the movie, the fact that the movie has become a Thanksgiving tradition for so many people, I think it's just kind of one of those after the fact realizations, that people have. I think that if I was part of making a movie like that, I think it would take my breath away. Oh
yeah, and but you're so right, because going back to 1987 when this film first came out, I remember seeing it the very first time coming out of the theater and having laughed my head off and think, man, what a great comedy, what a great funny film. And that's a lot of the type of films I love. Is I love to go see great comedies because, as they say, laughter is the best medicine. And I really love going to see a hilarious film like this and just laughing throughout the entire film. That's what to me makes a great film. And you're right. This was just a funny film when it first came out. But this year celebrates the 35th anniversary. Just think about that, Gar. And 35 years later, this film is now considered a classic. And just to talk about what you're kind of go home with this thing about, they have no idea what this film's going to be, legacy-wise when they're filming it. They had a budget of $15 million to make the film, and it broke the box office at $49.5 million. So they got all their money back,
Well, that's just box office for the United States.
Yeah.
Once it got released worldwide,
and then on DVD and all that,
more money.
Yeah.
So monetarily, the movie was a huge success.
Oh, sure.
But there's more to grading the success of a movie than just the monetary.
Oh, sure.
Because what separates great movies from good movies is the impact and connection that the movie has with its audience.
Yeah, to take that home, I'll tell you. Like I said, I watched this film in prepping for today's episode last night, as you did, Gar, and it was I laughed just as much as ever. I love the film just as much as ever. And as crazy as this sounds, I was sharing with you last week, I think, or when we did our Charlie Brown episode, that today, which is November 6th, and Monday, November 7th, you can go to your local theater, and they're showing for 2 days only this classic film, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And I'm thinking about spending today going to the theater and seeing it when I just seen it last night. That's how good of a film this is to me. Even though I just seen it last night, I'm planning to go to the theater, laughing my head off and having a good time, even though I just saw it,
Well, here's another thing, about the movie. I think the most famous scene in the movie is the F-bomb scene.
Okay. Yeah.
And rightly so, because it's a lot of that scene was improvised by the female actress in the scene. Mm-hmm. And when John Hughes was making the movie, he was kind of, prompting her to go down different avenues with the character, in filming the scene, and she was taking the information and improvising with it, and she was doing it really, really well, and John Hughes really liked how she was improvising.
Now, Gar.
And so that's how the whole thing was. It had a lot of improvising, in it. But it's a great scene, and I absolutely love the scene. But there's a scene that I love even more.
I think I know it, but let's see.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
For many years, I would always just start cracking up when that scene would come up. Uh-huh. It's when they introduce the character Owen.
Oh, okay, yes, yeah.
The guy that gives them a ride in the back of his truck that tells his wife to get out of the truck.
Oh, she can do it, yeah.
To put that giant
trunk
luggage in the back of the truck.
Yeah.
That guy that played Owen played that character so well. I just used to die laughing.
And you know why that's true? Because the fact that he's just in the one scene. And it left that impression on you. Now, going back to the airport scene with that lady, here's a little bit of trivia for you, Gar. Did you recognize her from anywhere?
Oh yeah, yes. Of course, Ferris Bueller.
Not only that. She played on the TV show The Hogan Family with Jason Bateman.
Okay.
She played the neighbor in Mrs.
Never watched the show, but
yeah, with Jason Bateman. She played if you watch that, she played the nosy neighbor, Mrs. Poole. So people know her from that. But yeah, see, she's another character actor that, again, even if you didn't know her from the Hogan Family on TV, you would know her from Ferris Bueller. Again, kind of a nosy secretary type. But yeah, people know her, I guess, from those two films. And, she doesn't have a huge film career, but iconic films, it's funny. And then there's another moment like that in the film. We did you notice who played the part of the cop that pulled him over?
Oh man, Michael McKean.
Lenny from of course Laverne and Shirley, which we did an episode. And again, he's just in the one scene, but kind of an iconic scene. And I don't know why. Maybe it's just because there's Lenny. But he was he also as a cop the part he's playing in the film for the one scene, he, after they've been in this crazy fire, the car sets on fire. It's still kind of drivable, but they can't tell how fast they're going, and then he's kind of like thinking what you're thinking as you're watching, like, how the hell can they be driving that car? How the hell can it be safe? And he's like telling them, well, do you really think that car is safe to drive? I think we're going to have it impounded,
It was a great scene.
It is a great scene.
When I was doing the research, there was a little bit of information about the actress that did the F-bomb scene with Steve Martin.
I think her name is Edie Mature.
She was saying to this day that she will run into people that will recognize her, and they will, to this day, they will ask her to repeat that line.
That's crazy.
Effed.
That's crazy. And, and again, let's talk a little more about the film. Now, as I was saying, Steve Martin played the role of Neil Page, a high-strung marketing executive, and John Candy played the part of Del Griffin, a good-hearted, friendly, fun-loving, but hugely annoying salesman. So just the characters right there. As the film is kind of starting, you kind of see who these two guys are once they start interacting with each other. And you can see that kind of Steve Martin's kind of just a cranky old... that's the thing. He's not really that old when this film's being made, but even if you remember when he was on Saturday Night Live, he always had white hair. He always looked like an old guy. But, so he's kind of a high-strung, kind of cranky, loudmouth guy, and he gets easily agitated. And so just when you see kind of who these guys are, it's setting the film up, and then for everything that happens, after that.
Well, it's when you're a writer, and you're in the creative process of thinking up these scenes, part of the I guess you would call formula of comedy is two characters that are so
completely different.
Yeah. And their choice of the characters being in different economic classes.
Oh yeah, true.
And which actually fueled for the script writing.
Yeah.
Because when you have such dramatic differences, social differences and economic differences and things like that, it's just a plethora of different avenues that you can go down in coming up with funny scenes.
Yeah.
And of course when the movie was finished, we get to see the best of those scenes.
Yeah.
But it was so important to have these characters have so much. They're so different from each other,
and yet they come together. And it's kind of like if you've ever there's an old saying in reference to like great films, great books, great literature. Like it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. That's kind of what this film is, And it's kind of funny because as the film is starting, and there's a one scene where Del steals Neil's cab he's trying to get, and then they run into each other in the airport, and they kind of realize, hey, wait, they recognize, hey, wait, I know you from somewhere, and then, oh yeah, you're the guy that stole my cab. It sets the whole thing up, and as I'm watching that last night, I'm kind of thinking, not so much about somebody stealing my cab, but if you get this kind of annoying, over-friendly guy, oh, hey, I'm really sorry, let me make it up to you, and he's talking your head off, I'd be kind of thinking like, Neil, like, okay, I'm busy reading my book, leave me alone. So you could kind of relate to these two guys, even as the film is just starting.
Yes. And there was so much to like about each character, and of course there was things to not like about it. For Del's character, he was annoying.
He really was.
He was, creating situations where, say, like using the bathroom, he'd use all the towels and leave nothing for Neil's character to be able to take a bath, and everything's disgusting.
Who would get annoyed?
Soaked with water on the floor, and all this stuff. So, there was things to not like about Dell's character, but then there was a whole bunch of things to really like about Dell's character. But then the same thing for Neil's character. There was a whole bunch of things to not like about his character, and then there were things to like about his character also. But it's just unique to come up with these differences, but to actually make them in the end of the movie kind of start to make these realizations.
Yeah, what's interesting, I think the film overall is relatable for that very reason. You make a great point that people in general, we are all flawed. Nobody is perfect. I mean, I may think I'm the most intelligent person. I'm sure there's somebody more intelligent than me. I'm sure I got my annoying little quirks, but we all do, so that's the thing. And even I think along the way throughout the film, Dell has this realization. Like the one point where I start, because he's talking about his wife, and at the beginning of the film, you think, okay, his wife is at home or whatever. But halfway through the film, he's talking to his wife's picture, and I'm thinking, because I've never seen him pick up the phone or talk to his wife or anything like Neil does in the film. And so at one point I started thinking, okay, maybe she's dead. And you kind of, eventually that's revealed in the film. But at that point, he starts talking to his wife's picture, and he's like, oh, damn, I'm annoying, maybe he did his wife the same way. And he's like, oh, it's no wonder people don't like me. I just talk too much. And he's talking out loud to himself, and he's thinking all these things. And he has kind of a realization moment here,
Well, it's almost like I would say it's a subtle clue.
Yeah.
In the movie, because, instead of talking to a picture, the rest of us would pick up the phone.
Yeah.
But, there's it's an easy clue to miss.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then that's where, when they have that scene where Steve Martin is making kind of these realizations, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And then here's another thing I kind of wrote down. Throughout the film, the many differences between Neil and Dell become immediately obvious, and they're huge differences that sparks great moments of comedy throughout this now classic film. And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier. You take these two guys, they're polar opposites, and of course when you get two polar opposite guys together and these annoying little quirks, it leads to all kind of crazy antics,
And John Candy is extremely talented in those type of scripts, those type of situations and scripts. The man was a great comedian, and I was so sad when he passed away.
You and me both.
Because he just, I don't think he ever did a movie that wasn't funny.
No, and that's another thing. We got to pay tribute to John Candy here in this episode too, because the two guys together, Steve Martin, but John Candy, when you watch this, you realize he's no longer here. Like, in doing the research, I come to find out he died tragically young, as you said, 41 years old, I think he was, had a massive heart attack. I remember, the day was announced on the evening news that he had passed. Wasn't totally shocked because, he was a little obese and whatever, and people tend to have heart attacks, but I was very sad. There was a little bit of shock there, though, too. I wasn't totally surprised. But now, as you mentioned, we got this film, we got Uncle Buck, we got all these other The Great Outdoors. That's another fun one he did with Dan Aykroyd. I always love watching. But, another very much like Andy Kaufman, but I think John Candy kind of had more of a career in the sense that he has more films we can enjoy watching. But that's kind of another sad thing when I watch this film, to realize he's no longer here. But I thought, wow, we got all these great films, so thank you, Mr. Candy.
Well, and there was, when I was doing research, I came across another piece of information that I just found it really funny. When John Candy showed up to shoot Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, he showed up with a bunch bunch of exercise equipment.
Yeah. I read that. Yeah.
Like a bunch of exercise equipment.
Yeah, I read that.
During the entire time that they filmed the movie, he never used any of that equipment.
Yeah.
He had it all shipped in. He had it all set up.
Yeah.
He had the whole thing done. And then he wound up doing the whole movie and never used any of it.
Yeah, can you imagine? Just very tragic, And here's another thing that's kind of interesting. The film got 2 thumbs up. Of course, I'm talking about those great classic film critics from Siskel and Ebert. At the time in 1987, Gene Siskel declared Planes, Trains, and Automobile features John Candy's best role to date. And Roger Ebert wrote, the film is perfectly cast and soundly constructed, and all else flows naturally in this movie. So, again, Siskel and Ebert were the film critics back in the day, and I dare say, you and I have talked about doing a future episode, I think, next year on those two guys, because, you turn on the local news every night, they got their local film critic, but it's except for maybe Sam Rubin, there's nobody that's come close to those two guys,
Oh yeah. I mean, when they were in the height of their popularity, I mean, that's where everybody went to find out if a movie was good or if it wasn't, considered good. And they were, a lot of people liked those two because they were very respectfully open with disagreeing with each other.
And see, that's what made that show. I mean, I would tune in a lot of times just to see what new movies were coming out, what they thought. But that was why I tuned in, because you'd watch these episodes and these guys, especially when they disagree on a film, they would go at it, and you'd swear to God they hated each other. You kind of got the feeling, these guys must hate each other, but they really kind of, from all the years of working together, they loved one another. And Gene Siskel, he died before Roger Ebert, and when Gene passed away, you could tell, just how much Roger missed him, and everything, and what the two guys really meant to each other.
Yeah, it was a chemistry.
Yeah.
It was definitely a chemistry. They were right about what they were saying.
Yeah.
The movie, was very, very seamless. But Leonard Maltin, who was around then too, but not quite as popular. Yeah. He hated the soundtrack for the movie, and when I came across that that little bit of information, I was kind of realizing that I don't think that John Hughes really put that much of a focus on the soundtrack for the movie.
Although I will say this, when I was,
it was good, but I didn't consider it like super memorable either.
Yeah, no Grease or anything like that, or Saturday Night Fever, but on that note, when I was watching the film, there's this one scene where it's kind of kind of rock and tune, and I looked it up. It's called "Mess Around." Come to find out, I mean, that was kind of the one rock and tune that after I got done watching the film, I'm thinking, I gotta look, what is that song? And apparently that's a Ray Charles tune. So that was the one song that I kind of dug that wasn't the film. And then one final note, getting back to Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert went on to say, which I think we've kind of made the point ourselves throughout today's episode. Roger Ebert went on to say, Steve Martin and John Candy don't just play characters, they embody themselves. And that's why the comedy, which begins as one of the best road movies, buddy pictures, which is able to reveal so much heart and truth.
Yes. Yeah. And another part of the success for the movie is the subtleness of the comedy, the little details that made the scene even more funny.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is when looking back at the movie, there were little things that they would do in each scene that like little things.
Yeah.
But they made a difference in how funny the scene. Say, for example, when they were in the car when John Candy lost control of the car. And
that's
told
one of the
Steve
best
Martin
scenes.
when he woke up. That they almost hit a deer. His hands were literally stuck, almost like they were glued to the steering wheel. And then when he takes his hand off the steering wheel, it makes that suction kind of sound. Like it was really stuck.
Yeah.
And it really adds emphasis to the intensity of the scene of what had just happened. And that is John Hughes' style. A lot of people don't realize it, but he has a lot of small details in the scenes that make it even more funny.
Yeah, and what's funny throughout the film is how they keep coming together. I mean, there's one scene where they part after getting on the train, and you could tell Del kind of wants to hang out with Neil, and Neil's not as wanting to do that, but yet they always somehow, like, then the train catches on fire, starts smoking, everybody has to get off, and then magically they come back together, and you could see kind of thinking Neil wanting to get rid of Del kind of still at that point in the movie, kind of annoyed, like, I can't get rid of this guy, but yet they continue to have these moments, they continue to have these great misadventures all the way up until the end of the film.
Well, that detail that you were just explaining really is a big part of Neil's character.
Yeah.
Because he kind of portrays himself as not really that nice of a guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even though it's a comedy, he's always looking down on Del.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And which is not a good human characteristic. When someone looks down on another person, it's never viewed socially as a good thing to do.
No, in fact,
you know what I mean?
Well,
you can get a lot of social backlash from doing that kind of stuff. And Steve Martin's character would realize, that I'm not really being a very good person, and I'm better than that.
Yeah, he had those
and
moments.
Then he would, wind up reaching out to Del and winding up helping Del, or wind up reconnecting with Del, and so it really shows the complexity of Neil's character.
Yeah, and you know what? The one scene where that's really kind of relevant, not just throughout the whole entire film, but where I really noticed that the first time when I'm watching the film last night is they're in the hotel room, and Neil's really has had a bad day. He all of a sudden just goes off on Del. You're effing annoying. You talk too much. You never shut up. You wonder why nobody ever listens to you. Nobody cares about what you had to say. And he just goes off on this guy. And then like Del's response is something to the effect of, well, I hope that made you feel better. If you like hurting my feelings. And you kind of feel from both sides. You kind of are able to feel both guys' point of view. Like, well, if I was stuck in a hotel room with this guy, maybe I would be annoyed having been with him, and all these things happen as a result. But then you really start to feel for Del, like, boy, what a dick. How could he talk to him, that way? What a mean creep, but then, like you say, there's that one scene where Del's sitting out in the car, and he's in the warm hotel room, and he's going to freeze to death, and he's okay. He doesn't like really apologize, but he tells you better get in here. You're going to freeze to death. He has those little moments like where a light bulb goes off, and he's like, I better not be so mean to this guy.
Well, another thing, about the movie is I think we all kind of realize that we've had
those moments.
These moments
in life. Yeah.
We've all experienced to some degree the same experiences. Say for example, there was one time when I was out on the road and I wound up sharing a room with another band member.
Wow.
And I didn't sleep at all that night because that band member didn't snore subtly. He snored like with a bullhorn.
Wow.
It was so bad that I couldn't sleep at all, and I literally had to take the covers on the bed and go in the bathroom and put the covers on the floor and try to sleep in the bathroom where it wasn't quite as loud.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And those are, a similar experience to, John Candy when he was making those weird sounds while Neil was trying to sleep. We've all experienced these kind of uncomfortable experiences and stuff. So it really made the audience relate to the characters.
Yeah, and again, watching the film last night, I noticed a couple things talking about being 1987 and when the film was made. Okay, one thing that people might not pick up on right away, but I kind of did. They didn't have there was not a single cell phone throughout the film. They had one of those big dial rotary phones like they used to, in every household. I didn't really see any payphones or anything. You don't see a whole lot of digital technology in the film, but again, it's 1987, and so that's why I notice a lot of times when you watch newer films, you'll notice that everybody's got a cell phone in the film. I mean, again, that's kind of to go along with that's what's going on in the world in modern day. But you notice these little things about when the film was made.
Well, in 1987, if you were running late to be at work, you literally had to get off the freeway at your next opportunity because usually you're late because you're stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
And you would have to get off the freeway and you would have to try to find the nearest gas station because gas stations is where the payphones were.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to get on, and hopefully you got the change.
Yeah, hopefully,
because, sometimes you don't have the change, and then you'd have to go into the gas station, break a bill so you could have enough change, and then you would literally make the phone call to your work to let them know, and by the time you got off the freeway and called your work to let them know you're going to be late, you're already late.
Yeah. I mean,
that's how it was back in 1987.
Yeah, I mean,
now you just pop on your phone and because you can do that and just verbally tell your phone in your car to call your work and then get them on the line when you're still in your car and you're stuck in traffic, and you can tell them in real time. The difference between making that call now is you can make it now in real time. Back in 1987, maybe when you made that realization, maybe about 20 minutes later, you would actually be able to make that call 20 minutes to a half an hour.
Yeah, and then I remember too back in the day, like you just kind of brought me back to those payphones. I'm talking about having to have a quarter, and then there was a point where they started it went from being a quarter to 50 cents. And I remember if I didn't have 50 cents, sometimes I have to make a collect call. All this stuff is kind of funny to look back on. And then another thing is talking about cell phones for a minute in modern technology. I think the greatest invention, one of them at least, is GPS, because I remember back in the day, I would get horribly lost. I was no good at reading those big Thomas Guide maps, but I tell you, if I get lost these days, all I have to do is pull out my cell phone, type in my home address, and I'm able to get home at least,
Yes, I love GPS. I know we're kind of getting off track, but this is part of
what we
the
do.
Time Machine.
Yeah.
Not just the movie, the actual times.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things that were very, very different at that time. Between then and now, that only people that would listen to this, our time machine,
would know.
That lived in those those time periods would really understand. But the younger generation, they. Because cell phones have been around for their entire life, it's hard for them to
understand,
mentally digest that there was a time before cell phones.
I mean, Gar, if you even go back to like watching old episodes of Happy Days, there's nothing. I mean, for 11 years, Happy Days was on TV. You can watch any of these old episodes. There's not a single reference of anything even related to like a computer. It's not until like some of the later 1980 shows where they started having references to even computers, because the computer technology was, so new back then. And then before we wrap up today's episode, I thought it was kind of interesting. I read that both Steve Martin and John Candy named Planes, Trains, and Automobiles as their favorite film of their careers. And then, of course, another fun fact is that John Candy, I guess, loved the Flintstones, and that's why he sung the Flintstones theme in the movie when they're on the bus. And that was another kind of silly kind of scene, but it was fun. Like Steve Martin's character Neil in the bus, he's trying to I guess let his hair down, be cool, and he starts breaking out in this song. Nobody's interested, but once Del starts singing the Flintstone song, everybody else on the bus joins in, and fun is had.
Yes. Another one of those differences between social class equating in comedy.
Yeah, and again, like we were saying, we like to do when we do these episodes is we want to kind of remind people what was going on in 1987. Well, Ronald Reagan was still alive back in 1987. He was actually the president of the United States at the time. It was his first 4 years of his 8-year run as president, and so and prior to being a politician, of course, he was known for being a famous actor. So that was also going on. And then this will take you back, March 19th, 1987. Do you remember televangelist Jim Bakker resigns as head of the PTL due to a sexual scandal with Jessica Hahn, I believe it was. He hands over control to Jerry Falwell, and so that's kind of interesting,
Yep, I was around when that all went down. I remember it going down, and it was a big crash and burn.
Yeah. And then I even remember him going on TV and making one of these famous apologies, and I think the line that we all remember is, "Father, please forgive me, for I have sinned." When even all these years later, when you think of Jim Bakker, that's what you think of. That's what, which is kind of sad. You think
of famous thing. The two famous things from that was him saying that, but then also Tammy Faye's crying to get people to donate. Every time she cried, the donation numbers would go up.
Yeah, and then here's another fun fact that I just discovered. Another thing that's kind of celebrating its 35th anniversary this year, like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, is The Simpsons. April 19th, 1987, The Simpsons premiere as a short cartoon on the Tracy Ullman Show. So that's where that premiered, and then they decided to turn it into a series after that.
Did you also know that Elton John wrote a song? He collaborated with a lyricist to write a song for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And, Paramount Studios that made the film insisted on the ownership of the recording, and Elton John's record company wouldn't allow it.
Wow.
So the song has never been released. Wow. I would love to hear that song.
Yeah. That's...
It's during a time when Elton John's songwriting was like, at its apex. Yeah. And, to think that the song, I just have a feeling it's probably a really good song.
Yeah, and another interesting thing that I found in my research, I don't know if this is still the case, it says it was reported that a remake was in development in 2020 with Will Smith and Kevin Hart. Now, I haven't heard too much about this, if they're still planning to make a remake of this, but if they do, I'm kind of willing to bet that Will Smith will be out.
Yeah. He's definitely canceled these days.
Yeah.
Rightly so.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But the movie was such like amazing comedy, but yet extremely high element of heartwarming.
Yeah, and
you know what I mean? And it really had. If you didn't have this connection and chemistry that John Candy and Steve Martin had, the movie, there's no way that the movie would have been as successful as it is.
Yeah,
You know, the movie really, I mean, there's so many elements that if you take the element away, just the John Hughes element away, the movie's not successful. But if you take the elements of John Candy and Steve Martin away, the movie's not as successful.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's just what I guess my point is, it's almost akin to like the perfect storm.
Yeah. Now again, not that I don't think it would be successful, but like even just talking about, they were at one point talking about doing a remake with Kevin Hart and Will Smith, both great actors in their own right. But I do think a couple things about that. As great as Will Smith and Kevin Hart as actors, I just can't get away from the fact that this film we've been talking about from 1987. When I think of those characters, first of all, I think of Steve Martin and John Candy. Second of all, I kind of think if you're going to remake a film, this is just me, like, you know, no offense to anybody, but like, you know, Neil Page in the original film is white. He's not black. So I don't know. I kind of think it's kind of like when they tried to redo the Wonder Years. Like when I think of the Wonder Years, I think of Fred Savage, and that's not anything to do with me being a racist or anything. It's just like you know, when you think of Richie Cunningham, you can't really think of anybody else playing the part but Ron Howard. And if somebody tries, they may do a decent job, but it's just not going to be the same for a lot of people.
Well, but then also, you know, thinking about it in this way, you know, if you're going to make a remake, the sheer fact that you're making a remake puts everything kind of on a
different perspective.
Unstable path, because now you're talking about rehashing something on the original popularity of it, but yet releasing the new product being so much different from the original. You see what I'm saying? It just kind of doesn't make sense. If you're going to make a remake, the reason why you're making the remake is because you're trying to capitalize on the popularity of the original. But yet what you're actually putting out has nothing to do or very little to do with the original. Which raises the question in my mind. Why?
Do it. Why? I mean,
you know what I mean? Because if you're going to do that, it alienates immediately. You're putting it out because it's a remake, so there's an appeal to the original audience that loved the original. But then you're also trying to appeal to the more audience because you're using more modern characters and using more modern storylines, so those characters would relate to people now. You know what I mean? Because because you can't, if you're going to rehash, you can't rehash 1987. You have to rehash 2022, 2022. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
It creates this juxtaposition that makes everything unstable from the get-go.
Plus, why do these big studios do remakes of these classic films to begin with? Because
they're trying to capitalize on the popularity. Studios don't want to take chances because they're shelling out millions, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But the problem is you're trying to control something that's uncontrollable.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? You're trying to control it by rehashing something, capitalizing on its popularity at a different time, but yet you're using modern actors. It's like totally uncreative from the beginning. If you're gonna do that, then completely come up with a new script and completely come up with a new idea that relates to now, and don't make a remake.
Yeah, I mean, they also. The other reason,
just do not. 90, I'd say at least 95% of the remakes that get made now, because there are pressure to make these remakes by the studios. 95% are not successful or are a disappointment.
Oh yeah, I mean,
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The remakes never have the same success as the original.
Never will. And the other part of that is, I say they usually get the idea to do a remake of a classic film when these studios are running out of ideas. They don't have a good idea, and so we'll go with what worked before. And again, if they were going to make a part 2 of this film, they should have done it when John Candy was still alive. I mean, the only way I could see them really doing, Steve Martin's still alive. I think they could do something where, maybe Neil finds out Del has passed away, and he sends him a letter. They were in communication all these years, or something about looking back on their friendship. That's one way you could do it. But again, I don't think it's going to have anywhere the substance that the original film had. And to kind of put a nice bow on today's episode, I do want to end talking about, as I said, the final scene, as you were talking about, because one thing I picked up on is these guys, especially Neil, felt like Del was driving him crazy all throughout the film, but by the end of the film, these two guys, they've made a connection, and I think even Neil's left feeling, I'm not, I want to become a better person, or maybe I'm a better person for knowing this guy. Even when they get to the front door, and Neil's family's all there, his wife answers the door, you could see, like, in his wife's eyes, she's almost like, wow, you're really impressed me here, inviting this guy to Thanksgiving dinner. I'm really proud of you. You get that feeling, and you realize Del doesn't have anybody to go home to, and this family, they welcome him into their house, even if it's just for Thanksgiving dinner. And who knows? You draw the conclusion, maybe these guys will become friends now.
Which is what we actually celebrate for Thanksgiving. Because I think it is a more recent kind of modern thing. I don't know. I could be wrong. But, that's what we do. We invite people over to our house, even if they're not family members, to enjoy Thanksgiving Thanksgiving dinner together to give thanks.
And I think about the film,
thanks for what we have, and show our gratefulness for what we have.
And that,
that is the most important point of the movie. They're not able to make that point until the very end of the movie, which is when I start getting all misty and kind of weepy. You know what I mean? Because I am a very sentimental person.
Yeah, me myself too. And the other thing, I think at the end, where Neil has an aha moment, he comes to the realization, I think, that how really thankful and grateful he should be that he, like just talking about the family he has, his kids and his wife to go home to. He realizes his aha moment at the very end is like, not everybody has this to come home to, and I should really be grateful for that.
Yes, it's a very beautiful scene, and I love watching the end of the movie, every time. I have this, just like when I watch It's a Wonderful Life every Christmas, I have the same effect that happens to me with this movie too.
Yeah, two more moments that really stood out for me throughout the film, where you were talking about the one scene where they're kind of going all over the road, the car's out of control, they almost get in an accident, and for a good portion of the scene, Neil is like sleeping. He just zonked off, and you're like, how can the car be moving around so crazy like that? He's not even aware of it. I guess he's just that. He's just that tired. And then when the other car's driving, they're trying to tell him, hey, you're going the wrong way. And then he's like, he's had too much, going the wrong way. And then they realize, and then there's a moment like kind of a flash, you see your life flash before your eye moment where like John Candy kind of looks like the devil and it look like skeletons and all this stuff. And it's like, wow, okay, if you can live through that, I guess you can live through anything.
Yes. All I can say is the movie has stood the test of time.
Yeah.
The movie has been embraced by millions of people as a Thanksgiving tradition.
Yeah.
None of the people that made the movie were ever those things that I just said. Were the farthest thing from the people that made the movie's mind when they were actually making the movie.
Yeah, and but one scene where I think I really noticed the two guys were kind of really finally making a connection was I think it was after the car had just burned up, and Neil looks to Dell, and they're kind of sitting there on top of the trunk waiting for somebody to give them a ride, and Neil says the line, I think we're going to maybe one day look back on this and have a good laugh. And then Dell kind of chuckles. He goes, yeah, you think so? and I mean, right there. And just to end this today, I think, Gar, the other thing I think they need to do, these great Hollywood studios, instead of trying to remake a film like this, it's a classic. I used to love every Christmas, they'd have these great family Christmas films. I mean, my most favorite one of all time is Chevy Chase's Christmas Vacation. We're going to be doing an episode on that in about a month from now, so I look very forward to that. And before we wrap it up finally today, I want to let people know when we do this 2 weeks from now, we're going to be kind of doing a different type of show, and that we're still talking about pop culture, but we're going to be going back and talking about the history of the Thanksgiving Macy's Day Parade, which I was going online and I've already started doing some research, and I can't believe, before it was ever on TV, it started out as a thing on the radio, so that's going to be fun to kind of talk about next time.
Yes, looking forward to it.
Well, you take care, my friend. It's been a great episode, and I want to thank you for making the suggestion to do this, because I had fun watching the film.
Thank you so much.
You take care, Gar. I'll talk to you. Bye-bye.
Chaotic Riffs Magazine.